Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Animal Regulation Subcommittee of June 12, 2025 at 7 p.m. Jessica has circulated some mock-ups on the draft of what we're talking about at the last meeting. I also asked Kristen to put into our packet the job description as it stands in the Board of Health as of today, I guess. This has been, I don't know when this was made, no date on it.
Yeah, the one.
Oh, 2010, okay. Yeah, I'm still reading, yep. December 7th, 2010. So, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it. We can read through it. We don't necessarily have to stop what we're doing and focus on that for the moment. Under section 1, not much was changed, just scratched out the Mass General Law reference.
I had mentioned at the last meeting about the references, the legal basis. Both sections are only for farms.
Okay.
So none of this pertains to
Yep.
single-family residences
Yep.
that have animals. Okay.
So humor me for a few minutes. I'm going to go through this document, then I'll open it up to whoever wants to speak at this table, okay? So let me go through this,
Oh,
and
okay.
then
Sure.
don't stop me on every sentence that I'm talking about. I'm giving a quick overview, and then we'll get into the document. I would like to get a little more efficient with this, so I'm not losing time that I'll never regain. Section 2, scratched out the swine restrictions, and it references the Town of Douglas Regulation number 17. That won't, I would assume it's not going to be changed. Again, we're only a committee making up suggestions for the Board of Health, so we are not creating anything. We're only trying to work towards some information that they can use. 3, nothing's changed in that. Any chance anybody could silence their phones while we're running the meeting? You might find it funny, but I don't. Nothing's changed in section 4, 5. There's been some changes in there. Did you add anything to this, Jessica, or did you just scratch out this section?
Yes, what's
in bold print?
bold italic is an addition or edit.
Yep.
So, do you want to continue, or do you want my
No, I'm going to
comments?
continue. I'm
Okay.
just asking you, yep.
Yep.
So far, I didn't miss anything on the first sections. Number 5, what was added, the period's probably in the wrong spot, so I'm sure it's not .6 livestock units, it's 6 livestock units, or less than a quarter of an acre. There's a reference to 6 chickens, which is the minimum amount of Tractor Supply allows for purchase, which they,
That's going to be omitted, right?
it's in bold, so that means it was added, right? So
I don't think we should mention that,
again,
company. Wow.
Linda, stop
right,
for a second.
I'll-
Let me read through this thing, and then we're going to go
All
through it, and so we're done with this, okay? It's only a reference, not a final draft. Under B, considerations, low-density area versus high-density areas. Please be considerate of your neighbors. Question, do you want to address high or low density, and if so, how? Leaving this highlighted because, so you have your thoughts on that. So I'm going to take my own advice that I just gave Linda, so I'm going to continue with this, and then we'll get back to it. Under C, shelters, rescue and sanctuary, authorized under Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Resources regulations. Animal rescue and shelters regulations. Stuff that was in there and then it jumps over, shall be regulated according to guidelines therein and shall be exempt from density limitations. Again, we're going to discuss all these things. Stables and boardings of horses, references, laws. Under 6, things that were scratched out. Acknowledge there was concerns from the audience last time about the proposal of no free ranging permitted. If there was a question that you had in there, I'm just skipping over it because it's just a general question, just, and that's what we'll get into. Under 7, manure and waste management. What was added in accordance with the town Douglas wetlands protection regulations. Disposal, again references Mass General laws. Runoff references the conservation Mass General laws. Under 8, grandfathering, owned by current property owner, provided that the owner continues to reside, was scratched from the draft. Number 10, disease prevention, reporting, and quarantine. Again, references Mass General laws. Number 11, number from MSPCA for a contact number if somebody suspects any inhumane animal cruelty. Get down to violations. The board or animal inspector may take the following actions: verbal conversation, second offense, written warning for second offense. Then the other things are still hasn't changed. At the bottom it says if necessary may contact an independent hearing officer. That's still up in the air as to how that's going to work. Considerations, the rights of the animal owners. Which is comma, and that's just before the concerns of the neighboring residents. 12 is just a resource for 4-H and different town website and stuff like that. So on Schedule A, so the last meeting talked about how many animals listed in the following sections aren't solitary animals, like they be in groups. How do we address that if quarter acre, only one of these animals? So it's just reminding us of what the conversation was. Questions that on the bottom of Schedule A for everybody in here. Sorry, I don't have a copy of this thing, but the Schedule A is just identifying units and values for animals that try to come up with something. Do we want to have any weight guidelines, example, horses over or under a certain amount of weight? Do we want to have a general weight guideline for animals not listed? Any animals not listed that is over 500 pounds, 20 units, it's just an example. For the sake of efficiency, I'm just going to go around the table. Linda, you want to go through some of the questions you may have on this?
Well, there's like 20, so I'll just skip it.
So you
See
don't
what
have-
everybody else says.
So you don't have any questions?
I do, but there's like 20 of them. And you
Okay,
only want me to
what-
ask one right now, or?
Give you the
All of
opportunity to
them.
ask questions. If you want to go through them, you can go through them. So you're going to go through them eventually, right? So you might as well start.
Okay, on the authority, the legal basis, last time, prior to our meeting, I had looked up the MGL 11, Section 125A, and that's only for the operation of a farm and nuisance, which is the purpose of this whole document. And Chapter 128 is for farmers. This whole regulation should only be pertaining to farmers, a farm, not somebody who owns 6 chickens or 10 chickens.
Yep.
It's only for a farm.
So nobody sitting at this table is a lawyer.
I know that.
I know that, so I allowed you to finish your sentence. So anything that's a legal reference that's in here, it's just on the draft. That is going to be done by town council if they decide that they even want to put this into the regulation. That's not going to be something that we're going to say, it's chapter 111, no, it's chapter 112, whatever the case may be, so.
Well,
that's
it
just-
could be put into this, and then I'd be fine with it, because my lot, 1 acre is off the hook now, because it will never be a farm. So, you know, every farm out there, this will only pertain to them. But the first draft that the Board of Health gave us gave exactly what gives them the authority in MGL to write up anything pertaining to livestock. And that's not in here. It didn't mention
do you
operation
have-
of a farm as a nuisance or stables. You know,
Okay.
the regulation was in that first
The original
that they
draft.
had. And it was exactly what gives them the right
Okay,
of
so
way.
just,
Yeah.
so we don't get
All
hung
right,
up.
so that's
Wait a minute.
number one.
Let me finish. So we don't get hung up on the legal, I'm trying to help you and give you answers.
And
So
I'm
we-
trying to answer your questions with
Right,
my
so-
questions.
Absolutely. So on this here, I'll see if I can get some sort of answer. It's like pulling teeth getting answers if anybody paid attention to the last selectmen's meeting, which this will be on the next selectmen's meeting. So if anybody has any concerns, comments, or complaints, it might be in their best interest to show up. This here, we'll see if we can get any answer on it, but I don't want to get too hung up on the legal end of things, because I think that's beyond our capabilities to really narrow it down to what it's supposed to be. So what do you got next, Linda?
Okay, wait a minute, the number 5? There are still questions on what the definition of high density and low density are
Right, we have,
pertaining to
Yep.
whatever we do. So I'm just reiterating that, we still need to look at that. And, I mean, I do research at home. I don't only do stuff at meetings. I look up, okay, what's high density and low density in housing? High density was high-rises and apartments, which we really don't have any,
Okay,
except
so-
for Hayward Landing. And then low density was single-family homes.
okay, so when I make a reference to density, I'm talking for myself, nobody else here. I'm talking about the congestion of the houses, okay? So are they 10 feet apart or are they 100 feet apart?
And I couldn't find anything that had to do with animals that references those terms, high density or low density. So I don't know how anybody else will be able to interpret it. You know, we'd have to have a whole bunch of old regulations for what that means, or a definition section. All right, then, let's see.
No, that's fine. Would it help you a little bit if I skipped over yet and come back?
I had
No,
asked
know.
for that, but now I'm going to finish, so thank you.
No, that's
If I
fine.
could, through the chair.
No, that's fine. While Linda's looking that up, if everybody can review the job description for the animal inspector. Some of our members may know this, someone asked a question, or attendees. Does anybody know if this is posted on the Board of Health website?
What is that,
The job description for the animal inspector.
I didn't see it there. I printed out the swine regulation
Yep.
just to see what it was, but it's not posted on the
Yep.
Board of Health
Yep.
website.
Yeah, I had just asked the audience. I'll make a request that we get this posted onto the town webpage, so that it should be something that everybody could find very easily.
And under complaints, number 11. Where it says violation found. Number 2, or II.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
In your package, you got a job description for the current job description for the animal inspector, and we just started going through it. Jessica made up a draft, so we just started with Linda, actually. She's only had a couple of questions, so you haven't missed much.
Perfect.
Nope, I guess I was wrong about that one.
Skip that one.
Yeah.
The stuff involved is what she added.
Yeah, and that's what we took out.
Yep, anything struck out.
Yep.
But the bold stuff is what she added to us.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Colleen?
So I was kind of focusing on the low density, high density, try to
Yep.
find some clarity with that. And I did find, I could pass these around, just as an example, they define their low density and high density, and they do refer it to animal keeping, which I thought was interesting. They do have it by zoning here.
Where did you get this from?
You can hand one around, teacher.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just found it online when I was trying to define, to try to get, I think we're kind of stuck unless we get through the density part.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Right. I think that, once that's defined, and this kind of gave an interesting, for high and low densities with acreage and animal usage. This was the only thing I
Yeah.
could really find,
Right.
but it kind of made me start thinking about like the areas in town, like you said, so many houses per acre, and
Right.
that would be like a high density, as opposed to bigger areas spread out.
Yeah.
Is this from Mass General Law or some?
No, this is just some research. I was trying to get an idea of like how to define density. So the third section there talks about high and low densities, acreage. It's just a reference to somewhere to start.
So this might be some other towns.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay,
just-
I see. All
Just to
right.
get a kind of idea of if any areas were doing it that way. But the second section was the one that kind of made a little more sense to me, because it's talking about, so many residents per acre, and then how they define the animal usage. Because I think that's kind of a stepping stone to getting where we need to go. It's just.
It's a
like I said,
start, just
it's
a start
Right,
to
to
try
kind
to-
of get me thinking in
Yeah.
terms of what areas would be high and low density.
Well, that, and also it gives you an example of how to format it.
Right.
So,
Which wasn't bad.
yep. Yeah,
It's just that one section in the middle. The rest
Yep.
doesn't really apply.
Yep. Do you have anything on this?
No, I just, like I said,
Yeah.
I kind of focused on the density section of
Yep,
how to define the density and.
yep, but with the
Click.
edits that Jessica made, you don't have any questions or,
No, I think it's going well so far. Other than we're kind of hung up on the, how to define it.
yep. Howard?
No, I like the way it's going, but the density is the issue.
That's the tough part, I think.
We may be out in the sticks out our way, but there are some houses that are right next door to each other. That's going to be the hard part of how to address it.
Right.
Where we live is zoned for it, but, you know,
Chris, you want me to skip over you, give you a chance to look at that a little bit more?
Sure.
All right. Elizabeth?
I'm okay for right now.
Okay. I don't know if the author has any questions, but,
Sure. There was, let's see here. Is crosstalk okay if I reference what Linda was asking about the the legal basis? I just included those because that was all I could find regarding animals, so I will look up the original draft and how they worded their legal basis.
But we have to have in there what gives the Board of Health the right to do this, which is what they had in there.
So they had that in the
First
original
one, that
draft.
is a Mass General Law.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'll look up how they worded
And
it.
then they did add another one to it. I think it was for stables only. For
Okay.
Stables.
Okay. So, Mike, do you want me to go through each one and talk about?
well, you go
points?
through whatever questions you have.
Okay,
Right,
so
if
just
you have
questions? Sure. So as a talking point on number 5, I realized, we had suggested 10 livestock units per quarter acre.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about, what about if there's under a quarter acre? So the folks with 0 to a quarter. And, it's my belief that everyone should be able to keep some animals, at least 6 chickens. I thought it was a mass law. I could not find the law that says there's a 6 chicken minimum to purchase. I know that's Tractor Supply's rule. I know they're the biggest supplier in the area. I don't want to keep that wording in there where it says, example, 6 chickens is the minimum Tractor Supply allows, but I wanted to talk about that and research that a little bit more and hear all of your thoughts. And Mike, you're correct, that should be 6 LUs, not .6 for
You can't
between.
get a half a chicken.
Right, yeah, between 0 and
Points.
.25 acre. Because I live in the village residential area where there are some, quarter acre lots, maybe under, and some folks do have chickens. They abut the cemetery, so that's open space, it's open land. There's, their neighbors aren't complaining because they're deceased. So, just trying to think of all the different scenarios and all the different residents and how we might want to talk about that for folks with small lots. And then I guess to move on to the low density, high density, like I know we kind of disagree on this, Mike. My problems with the density limitations is, one, what if it's low density undeveloped land now, and then in the future, things get developed, becomes high density, and how do we define that? I like the chart that you brought.
Yeah, I just need to try
Because
to
that
start.
is a kind of starting point, but then it's like, do we want to include a chart like that where it defines like,
Right.
okay, if houses are this far apart, then you're medium, then you're low, then you're high, and then what if that changes? It just seems really really nitpicky and folks might not know. I mean, are they going to go out and measure? It's, these houses are 50 feet apart here. This street, they start to be 70 feet apart, so.
And who's going to do this?
Right, I just see it as being very complicated and problematic. I think just the animal unit guideline, 10 units per quarter acre.
great.
In a way, it's going to take care of itself because you're not going to get, 30 llamas on a quarter acre because of the
unit.
size of the lot. So I think it takes care of itself, honestly.
If it did, we wouldn't be here.
No, I mean, the animal units takes care of the density
Yeah.
problem.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Anything else?
Let me go through and see. Yeah, basically, I just add from last time, most of the things we had talked about last time were referencing the laws. So most of the things just say now reference this law, reference that law, because like manure and waste management, that's already covered under Mass General laws. They have complete guidelines on how to handle it. They have suggestions on composting. So I just referenced all of those. As we discussed before, local law trumps mass law. So if we did want to put in place anything in addition to that, if you guys want to, go home and reference the laws that I wrote down here, and you can decide if there's anything you would want to change or add, we could have talking
Yeah.
points for next time.
Yeah, so local law trumps. For clarity, you can be more strict than the state law. You can't be more lenient.
Correct,
So
correct.
it's just, so it's not misunderstood.
Thank you. Yep, so I did email Kristen the question about if denied, appeals may appeal to the independent hearing officer, and Mike, you mentioned that, we still don't know who that is. Kristen,
Well, it hasn't been sent up, it hasn't been set up yet. So
Okay,
This
so-
is another discussion on.
Yep, so
in a
that's-
different forum that I'm involved in that.
Okay.
There's a potential that there would be potentially a hearing officer for appeals. So
Right,
similar to what the
Yep.
ZBA is, but that's a board of people. This would be an individual
Right.
person.
okay, and then the Schedule A, just that question that you read last meeting, we talked about how the animals in the middle section, the 10-unit animals, how they aren't solitary animals, they like to be in groups. So how do we address that if, a quarter acre would only equal one of those animals? Alpaca, goat, sheep, miniature horse, llama, those are all 10 units. So say you had a quarter acre, you could get one if you chose to. So how do we want to address that? I just wanted to bring that up because we talked about that last time and kind of left it hanging.
Anything else?
That's it.
That's it. Chris, you have anything? No. Not right now, that's fine. So I'll go through a few of my comments that I have on it. So the legal basis, I firmly believe that's the town council's job to come up with that. There's nothing wrong with us putting some sort of reference on there. They could look at it and say, yes, does apply, or it doesn't apply. They'll come up with their own. The low density and high density, I think of it differently, and Howard may think of it differently because we're both in a very similar trade. If we go to work in Boston, that's friggin' high density, and we can't park our trucks anywhere, so we pay close attention to where we're working. An easier way for us to figure this out might be just to take an aerial map off of the assessor's map, and it shows you where all the structures are on different areas. And then you'll have a very good idea. As far as anybody, you being in a low-density situation in a high-density neighborhood, that's going to be a very unusual thing. The only thing I could think of off the top of my head is maybe the meeting house land where that is village residential, but you get down in the center of town, there is no area to develop, so it's about as dense as it's going to get. I don't think you're going to put any more houses in there. I don't even think you're going to put an ADU in there, which is the accessory dwelling units that the Massachusetts that pass as of right.
And right next to that is low density.
Right. So I would like to look at some of the maps that might help us get our head around this as to how we may want to address that. It's a concern that we need to consider, just to make sure we're fair to everybody, whether they own animals or don't. See if I had anything else in there that I wanted to talk about. Talked about the hearing officer portion of it, that's to be determined. So prior to the selectmen's meeting, because I didn't have enough time to get the answer that we were seeking, because the Board of Health didn't meet before the selectmen's meeting and before this meeting, so I couldn't go there. And the selectmen's meeting, because we met on Thursday night, the town hall is closed on Friday, I couldn't get on the agenda, so under 48 hours of things not reasonably anticipated, you can bring them up. So I brought it up. And I got some resistance on it. I don't know why I got resistance on it, but it was just real simple. I said the committee members, as well as the people in attendance, have a pretty simple question. Is this going to be a bylaw or is it going to be a regulation? I don't think that's too difficult to answer, but for whatever reason, it was. So I did talk to the administrator prior to the meeting, and he had a suggestion that may make sense. Again, it's not our decision, but it could be a suggestion. The bylaw identifies the mechanism in which you can make the regulation, but the bylaw is very general, and it would be for, and these are examples, health and welfare of the animals, as well as pest control, so you don't have rodents running all over the place. Ironically, I was in the Board of Health office, and a phone call came in for just that. Have a property owner that has horses, so they're animal people, and they have a problem with rats, but it's not from them. They actually hire a professional company to make sure that they can keep these under control. They're coming from a neighboring property that has chickens. Is the accusation. But I also know that the property that's next to that one also has chickens, so whose chickens are they coming from, right? Historically, chickens, their food's all over the place, so it's easy for these pests to come in. Horses eat everything that they get, so you don't normally attract rats with horses. So it's a legitimate concern that the Board of Health is challenged with trying to get an answer to. And this is what we're here for, is to try to help them come up with something so they can address it. How do they address it, right? So that's their challenge, but if we had something in here, it doesn't have to be over the top. We don't have to try to get every single thing in here. It's a starting point, trying to get it addressed so then it's fair to everybody that's involved, whether it's a non-owner or an owner. Everybody has the right to their property in both instances. So, where do we want to go as a board?
Well,
Yes.
we got to wait for you to talk to the selectmen, right? And
No, the
board.
selectmen's meeting's tomorrow, Tuesday night. I didn't put it on there. They put it on there. Why they didn't want to talk about it 2 weeks ago, and they're going to talk, that's fine.
Well, any information from the Board of Health, because that was the question, was asked at our last meeting in the audience, what does the Board of Health want? And you said you would try to find that
And
out,
I tried to find it. So
and we'll have to wait until
with
they meet.
the resistance, I said that the committee, as well as the audience, wanted to have this answer. And since I've been tasked with the job as chairman, it's my responsibility to get the answer. So I made the attempt to get the answer and didn't get it. So hopefully we'll get it on Tuesday night. I hope to see the same faces I see here tonight come on Tuesday and voice your concern. It's a way to, whether you're for it or against it, voice your concern, right? As what the process is. And if you don't agree with it, I want you to speak up. Because we're all here for the same reason. We're trying to figure out a way to get past this problem, right? And ignoring it doesn't make it go away. They've tried that for years. It doesn't work. And ironically, I went out there, I was out West Stockbridge or something, and I come down the street, and there's a huge sign, right to farm community. I'm like, people are sending me signs. I don't know what it is, right? It was just interesting to see the sign there. Again, my intention, and I don't think anybody sitting at this table's intention is to hurt anybody in town.
No, everybody loves their animals. So it wouldn't
I
happen.
think we all got on it because we wanted to protect our own rights. That's what I got on for. So, and to try to help and come up with something that's reasonable for everybody, so.
Mike, may I ask a question or a
You can ask
suggestion?
anything you
Oh,
want.
thank you. Chris, I read over the material that you gave us last time, which is, this is the right to farm bylaw from Paxton. I love this. I almost want to just say, like, suggest, rather than the animal regulations, which are very strict and stringent, this actually has some wonderful wording in here, very pro-animal. It has a section about how to resolve disputes. It defines which operations are covered. It just, if I may read part of it, it says, right to farm declaration, and again, this is the town of Paxton, you can look this up online. The above described agricultural activities may occur on holidays, weekdays, and weekends by night or day, and shall include the attendant incidental noise, odors, dust, and fumes associated with normally accepted agricultural practices. And then on section 5, I don't know if you all have this from last time, within 30 days after the bylaw becoming effective, the select board shall prominently post in the town clerk's office and make available for distribution the following disclosure. It is the policy of this community to conserve, protect, and encourage the maintenance and improvement of agricultural land for the production of food and other agricultural products, and also for its natural and ecological value. This disclosure notification is to inform buyers or occupants that the property they are about to acquire or occupy lies within a town where farming activities occur. Such farming activities may include, but are not limited to, activities that cause noise, dust, and odors, Purchasing and henceforth occupying land within Paxton means that one should expect and accept such conditions as a normal and necessary aspect of living in Paxton. I just think that is so wonderful for our
Yeah.
farming community.
I liked it too.
And then, yes, then they go on to resolution of disputes, suggesting seeking an amicable solution directly, owner to operator. And then if it needs to be moved up to file a grievance with the Board of Health and so forth. It's just a totally different way of approaching it,
It's an easy read,
right?
no calculations.
Right. So I was thinking, what if we draft something like this as an alternate draft? Can we do that?
This is a bylaw, this will go to town meeting.
Right, this would be different. Could we draft an alternate, like have, say the animal
I like
regs
it.
is one.
I'm
and
with
this
you, I
is-
like that it doesn't handcuff you into anything.
I
Right.
second that.
It just feels like it's freedom. This is more about animal
question
rights,
is-
owners' rights.
How do they deal with complaints?
It's in there
So they would just,
still.
Read the last paragraph.
Section 6, resolution of
Board of Health.
disputes.
Yeah, the part.
I don't know, I liked it.
Last paragraph for everybody sitting in the audience, because you're eagerly trying to find out what we're talking about here. It has reference to an agricultural commission, so you have to form that first.
Oh,
That would be nice.
But there would,
It
I would
says or its
assume, I would
agent.
assume that there has to be some sort of bylaw.
that?
because regulation or definitions of something in there is not as simple as what this says.
Why not?
Because how do you handle the disputes?
That's right in there, section 6.
So how do you handle it?
Just read what it says.
I read what it said, and I don't understand it, so explain it
it's
to me.
kind of,
I didn't write it, so I
No,
can't
know that,
explain
but
it.
if you can't, this is the point.
That's
right?
where the Board of Health would have the problem.
The Board of
explaining it
Health
to everybody
would
coming to
resolve.
This is
town.
what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, and I'm not
Right.
trying to be difficult with you, Jessica. It doesn't have anything. So if you complain about my animals, and so we're just going to argue and go before a commission, and they decide who they like better at the meeting, it doesn't work that way, right? You have to have something with some sort of definition in there.
More like what we have in the
Well,
draft.
we're starting to work on, right? This is just a draft, that's all it is at this point.
Right.
This would have had to been in place before everybody moved in. No, really.
Not if it got voted in.
right, if it got
Yeah.
voted.
If it got voted
Okay,
in.
so and let's pull it apart a little bit.
But now you
Okay.
have,
But it does say in there about the agent thing too.
Yeah, what is the agent?
So that'd be like, oh, right?
It says, in the absence of the agricultural commission, the town administrator or an agent. So that means that if we don't have an agricultural commission, our agent or the town administrator.
And we could always add on to this or to further define
Yeah,
it.
it was,
And how is that going to be any different than before we started this?
It's so much easier to interpret.
Well,
It
that's what I
doesn't-
mean.
that's what the issue is.
It's still very vague in the complaint.
That's, like I said, this would have had to been in place years ago.
I think this is a nightmare.
Looking through this, right, just reading it and listening to what Jessica had read about food and stuff like that and slow-moving vehicles, it's geared towards somebody like him. He mows hay all around town. He's going to be putting on the road with his little tractor and his whatever the thing is hanging off the back of it, right? But that's what it's geared towards. It's not.
but it
This-
it does say like recreational.
It does.
Recreational agriculture.
It's like if you have bees and someone wants to complain about your bees, like you're,
Now we got to add bees in.
no, I'm saying it says it in there.
I know. I'm only teasing.
Keeping, raising, or training horses is a commercial or recreational enterprise for
Yeah.
pleasure, therapy, and
Right.
4-H. It's right there.
But like, hey, you said it's the next bus, but like,
So when
Like those.
Jessica complains about me having my animals, how do they address it with this?
So, I mean, at this point, it's just kind of keeping us so we can do what we want to do, right? Like, I mean,
Well, I guess you can't,
That's what you're suggesting here. I'm just, try to answer what I just asked, right?
here, but-
Jessica's complaining about on my animals, whatever I have, whether I have one or 100, right? Complaining. How, when the complaint goes in, how do they handle it? How does the town handle it?
Right.
in this town,
They can't.
they try to see,
This just, the animal inspector has no teeth.
wouldn't.
In this town.
Wouldn't
With this, they don't either.
Well, we can
Right.
add that one page.
Just leads us right back to what we're doing.
Right. No, it's, the one page would just say the fines. Oh, it doesn't have to be the animal inspector, it could be the agricultural council,
Yeah. So
commission.
I'm gonna keep with my own personal thought, and everybody can disagree with me. I still think it comes down to density and what's reasonable, on that density. It's not as simple as a dimensional space. It's what's on that dimensional
But
space.
what does density have to do with complaints, if we're talking about complaints?
They
You
generate.
have complaints
Well,
that
yeah.
your rooster's heard down the
Right.
block. My
So-
rooster wouldn't be heard from anybody.
Right, but last September,
density.
the only resident in attendance lived on 2-acre lots and was complaining about the chickens across the pond. People are going to complain, they're going to complain.
If-
Well,
Exactly.
it's still about how the complaints are handled.
You're right
That's
there,
the
too.
bottom line.
right.
That's, how are they going to get handled?
Right.
If you have no definition, there's no way to handle them.
So let's define
We're in the
it.
same place we started.
I mean, this says, it says neighborly resolution first, then file a grievance with the town administrator or Board of Health. And then the town administrator shall forward a copy to the Agriculture Commission or its agent or the town administrator. And then the Board of Health, except in cases of imminent danger or public health risk, shall forward a copy of the grievance to the AgCom or its agent or the town administrator. They shall review and facilitate a resolution and report the recommendations to the Board of Health within an agreed time frame. So are you saying what's missing is the incorporation of the animal inspector and the fines?
No? How are they going to come to a resolution if there's no guidelines? This is the problem that they have right now, right? There-
There's no guidelines.
There's
You can
nothing
do
at
whatever
all.
you want.
If you stood down in that office and watched Kristen get a phone call and people call up, what can I have?
But this
Anything you
isn't,
want, I guess.
this isn't what can I have,
Somebody
this
calls
is
up, what?
complaints.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody calls up and complains. There's nothing that she can do. She was at a loss with that complaint about the rats coming to the
Right.
next thing.
That's actually under the Mass General laws. They have a whole section on pests.
Okay. Yeah.
She could reference that, I suppose.
did that person like try to talk to the neighbor with the chickens?
Yes. This has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, this is why, like, getting back to the very first meeting when I had emailed Kristen asking what the complaints were, it was because I feel that's the driving force behind this, and it was important information because knowing what they are points to what we need to figure out. So if they're about noise, do we need a noise? To mention noise. If it's about animals leaving the fence, we need to say fencing.
What did she say?
She said it was pretty much that, noise, fencing, pests, like, those were the main three things. And
Pests?
Pests.
Oh,
Pests.
Okay.
Animals leaving the yard, noise, and,
Rats.
yeah. So So talking about like, the units, that's for mostly for folks who are like, how many animals can I get? Because those questions come in too. But I think, I can't say because she didn't forward me everything, but the majority are probably not complaints about, there are too many animals, unless it's a concern of health, in which case they would call the MSPCA or the animal inspector, depending on the severity. So, but it was just a suggestion, because I got to read that over Kristen's last time, and I really liked that, just a suggestion to do an alternate version that was, we could incorporate stuff from both.
Anybody else have anything at the table?
Well, the question is,
I'm gonna
could you
take
use,
questions or comments from the audience.
could you use the right to farm and then somehow put in
You could go for the right to farm.
a section
And I don't
that
think there would be
defines it a little bit
I don't think
better?
there would be any opposition to that at all, because that's basically what this town is about. It's
Right.
Well, that's
extremely
why-
heavy equine community.
Very.
I think that's like a good thing to have, though. You want to keep it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be explored, but I don't want to get distracted from what we're supposed to be doing. So,
Which is what? We still don't know because we don't have the recommendation from the Board of Health on, do they want a bylaw or a regulation?
Because
Right?
we could do a blend.
They want
It
a way to
wouldn't
deal
take-
with complaints.
we're not writing a
And what
bylaw,
people-
we're not writing a regulation,
right.
we're not writing anything.
We're
What
making a
doing is
suggestion.
We're giving them some suggestions as to how they can address this, this issue that they have. As I said at the first meeting, and probably the second and third, is they could throw all this away if they want to, right? We're trying to give them, gain some thoughts, right? Whether we get them from the audience, we get them from ourselves, and give them some feedback and try to somewhat document it, so then they can sit there and come up with, whether it's a bylaw or regulation or whatever they come up with. I doubt very much you would come up with a bylaw that would incorporate all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because that would be a big mistake, because then now you need to go back to town meeting, so you're going to wait a year or 6 months if you go to special town meeting in the fall to address any screw-up that you made when you made this bylaw or regulation or whatever it is, right? So if you have a vague bylaw that identifies the path in which to make a regulation, then the regulation can be handled at the Board of Health level, and then it could be amended at any time, right, by public hearing.
Well, I did, the first meeting, hand out 2 regulations. One was from the town of Freetown, Mass., and the other was from the town of Bellingham, which was very restrictive. And the town of Freetown was just so easy to read through. It didn't regulate how big or how small your property had to be, and it also did, on page 3, enforcement, violation, and penalties. It says, what you need to do with your animal. Not how to care for it, but to make sure it wasn't getting loose.
Get loose, try to get it back.
Yeah, dinner calls. Make sure it's protected from the weather or extreme colds, even though that's probably a cruelty thing. But that was just such an easy read. It would be so easy for the Board of Health to regulate, for Kristen to hand to somebody moving into town. I mean, the one we have with the units, which I think is very cold. I don't like to call an animal unit. You like saying, well, how many kids do you have?
But she needs an easy way to address when someone calls up and says, I have a quarter of an acre, what can I put on it?
It doesn't matter in this one from Freetown. That's the whole whole thing. But then we're talking
But
density
then
for this other
then if they
thing.
put 2 horses on it, their neighbors are going to be,
I'm not familiar with the makeup of Freetown at all.
What do you mean, the makeup,
Of the
how
town.
big it is?
Of the town, of
The
how
density.
it's populated, is it?
It has exactly the same population that we do, not under, between 9,500 and 10,000.
What about space?
Has exactly the same square mileage, 38
Okay,
square miles.
Yep.
And that's the reason I picked it out. I looked up 70 towns that were all about the same size, same population as us. And all of them were so restrictive. And this one was such a, I said, that's us. That's all we want. And it's even got how they can address any concerns or what the animal inspector would think was a violation. And how to do it on the last page. But I personally think this other way is just so cumbersome. And not only someone looking at it who's just moving into town, they're going to say, forget it, we don't want to live there, we don't even, can't even read
it's
what
not
they
even the
print.
final document, so you.
I don't have a problem with that.
You're going to go through a whole,
Give it to Kristen and see,
was going to say that.
give it to Kristen when don't explain stuff to her. Just hand it to her and say,
why, is this the
can you
final document?
explain this?
Is this the final?
After if we decide to continue with it as is, then hand it to
Well,
her
we're
and
going
say,
to
can
keep
you
going, we're going to
explain
keep going
this
down this
to-
path until we
Yeah.
come to a conclusion, and this is just all part of the process, right? So everybody sitting at this table, I'm sure, disagrees with parts of this as it's being done. So that's part of a group discussion, right? So we'll get a consensus as we go through and see, but I do, for the sake of time, I want to open it up and see if there's any new questions or anything. There's some new faces in here, give them an opportunity to speak. What I don't want to do is I don't want to, as Keith Minard says at the meetings and town meetings, we're all friends, we're all neighbors, we all live together. We be respectful of each other. But if we have a concern or a complaint or a suggestion as to how, maybe you have a different view of how we should look at it. So, anybody in the audience have anything they'd like to add tonight?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Dealing with the different aspects such as noise problems.
Yeah, sorry, Sam, can you just say your name and address?
Yeah, Sam, Vine Street in Douglas.
Yeah, okay.
And so noise is a problem. A huge problem that I didn't hear anyone mention is odor. Odor is a huge problem. I live on a 1-acre lot. Someone bought 20 acres behind me. All the other houses on Vine Street are 1-acre lots. Now we have a farm behind us. So everyone, how am I ever gonna sell my house? Because you open the kitchen window and now it smells like horse manure. I come from a horse farm, doesn't bother me too much, but when you're sitting there cooking your dinner or eating your dinner, now I've lived there for 13 years, never had a problem like this before. But now I turn around to sell my house, people come to look at my house, and they're gonna sit there and go, I'm not buying this house. So odor is a huge, huge aspect that I didn't hear anywhere in there.
We've talked about it in previous meetings, that we just
Okay.
didn't read through. I picked up on the sections that she actually added to it, so you missed out on our other ones.
Possibly also perimeters, X amount of feet. I'm sure there are laws about that, but they butted their fences right up against my property, 10 feet within, but the odor carries. It carries right over. 10 feet doesn't make a difference. If they start stockpiling their manure piles, which they've done right behind my house, they have 20 acres. I'm only stuck on one. You know what I mean? I can't move my house around. They can move that manure pile 19 acres that way. So there should be some sort of guidelines about proximity of manure piles, things like that. Watershed, things like that. I know in Oxford they have manure management programs. where I don't know who does it, but you have to provide a plan of that way it's not gonna wash down the hill to this river, or all our wells are right along this property line on the back. Well, that's where their fields are. I don't know how much it can soak into the soil, things like that. But you start increasing your units. You got 50 cows, okay, you got 20 acres. You can have 50 cows if you want.
Right.
But I moved in there. I didn't have to deal with 50 cows before. You just appreciated my property value because who wants to buy my property now? And also, all that waste is coming my way. And you know what's funny is their house is way over there. It's on acre 1. And all of that is on acre, let's say 9 and 10, which is where all residential areas. So you have to have almost a perimeter or a proximity of how close you can be. These are just suggestions, you know, I can't limit someone, say, hey, you've got to do this with your property because I lived here first. No, that's not my right. They have just as many, but there's got to be certain guidelines and rules and regulations. You know, you have to have rules and regulations for, I used an example one night, for dirt bikes. I can't ride my dirt bikes at 10 o'clock. Well, you can't leave your roosters crowing at 6 o'clock in the morning, things like that. There has to be rules and regulations in line, so it's fair playing field for everyone. Because this guy with 20 acres, if he wants, he can do whatever he wants, and he ruins it for the 5 other people on the 1 acre lots in front of him. So I fully agree with the rules and regulations. You can't have maybe just a blanket, because there's always one guy that's gonna take advantage of the situation and screw everyone else. I don't care. I'm doing what I want on my 20, you know, so.
Have you tried talking to him?
Unfortunately, we are not on speaking terms. Because we've tried to talk to them.
Maybe write it in a letter.
It's just been met with
Just like you just
a lot of
said,
yelling and swearing, and
Just like you just said,
they don't
horse-
agree with my opinion.
I come from a horse farm, a horse
Yeah,
family.
sure, yeah.
Saying it like that, have you approached it like that situation?
It's just been.
Or has
you
it
know,
been a nephew
get-
fight?
get-
Because
yes.
you're so frustrated because it's out of your control.
That's what happened at
You have
first,
to
and
reel
now
it
it's
in.
just all out of control.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop this because you guys are having your own meeting, right? So if you need to do that, you
Yeah,
need to go
so-
somewhere else. So, do you have anything else, Sam?
No, that's good right there, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Yes?
Similar terms, someone brought up today.
Just the name and address, please.
Sorry, Jesse Halter on New Street. I believe someone brought up earlier today the change of land. For instance, you move in once and it's this size property and, you know, Flushing woods or fields around you, and then all of a sudden it changes. And how does that work? So that was being brought up. I believe that's a very good point that should be somehow addressed. Or maybe that's for Sam's kind of situation, that it moved in after the fact, but there should be some limitations of, hey, you need to make every consideration possible on the land use. I like the idea actually of the right to farm concept. I believe one of the things you guys may have missed or may not be clear in that is they said specifically agricultural properties, and that may be referring to agricultural zone properties, which aligns with the Massachusetts state guidelines. The Massachusetts state guidelines, everyone keeps bringing up in these meetings since January. Oh, the state has guidelines, don't worry about it. My understanding from talking to Kristen, and who's had conversations with the Agricultural Board of the state of Massachusetts, is their regulations only apply to agricultural farm properties of 5 acres and higher. So all of that regulation is guidelines, and it does apply to farm properties. I like the idea of the farm property concept, and that would apply to 5 acres and more, but I like the amended concept of, except in the case where you're coming in after the fact, and you need to at least take consideration and planning of your layouts and all those things to accommodate existing structures in the neighboring properties.
Yep.
But otherwise, the right to farm concept for those 5 acre plus opportunities, if you're moving in next to a farm, you should expect that, an actual farm property. I believe that's where the 0 to 5 acre properties in residential zones need that separate regulation because the state doesn't apply there. And unless you specifically define the right to farm as any property, quarter acre to, or any type of property up, the state doesn't apply unless it's 5 acres or anyway. So I like that concept, but I like the blended concept too of using the point system or the unit type system for the residential zones of 0 to 5 acres, and then the right to farm concept for actual farmers, so they have the right to do their jobs without being harassed. It makes sense.
Right.
I like the blend of both, so that you can accommodate both situations.
In RA and 2, just so everybody understands, it's 90,000 square feet of zoning, which is just over 2 acres. So it's not, it wouldn't be, I understand your right to farm point about over 5 acres with the state, but in our RA zones, it's 2 acres.
Except
2 acres, isn't it?
there are exceptions because there are already lot cut out before zoning.
Pre-existing
that are
non-conforming lots
1
do
acre or
exist, and
less.
do exist in those zones, but the zone calls for 90,000 square feet. And a lot of these properties have, as yours, right? You have a bond that's there. If you were to sell your house and somebody else moved in, there's a little bond there and there's a paddock. It would be very reasonable to assume that they're going to have a horse or two in there, right? That's,
Or if I wanted to get a horse again, I should be able to.
you could get a horse. I don't see why you couldn't.
I agree with that.
1 second, Jesse.
She's always had the barn, they've always had horses,
Right.
you should be able to.
My goal isn't to prevent anybody from having animals, right? Is just to try to come up with something that helps them address the occasional concern that comes in, or even a simple question, what can I have?
Right.
I don't know what to tell you. Wrong answer, right? It's not a good answer, right? So, yeah, I'll get to you in a second.
It's just-
Yeah. No, I'll get to you in a second.
If they knew what they could have,
Yeah,
you would know what to expect. Even as a neighbor, you'd know what to expect. That's as much as they can have, and that is all.
right.
So in the case where somebody, all of a sudden, 20 acres has, you got a shit pile next to you, nobody wants that.
Right.
So that's understandable. You,
And that could be just being antagonistic because of prior conversations, right? So it's what happens, right? So, but there's no guidelines on it. So Jesse, I'm going to skip over you because that woman hasn't had a chance to speak.
Just more, like, just what you were just saying, what can, like guidelines, what can I have?
Right,
How can I have it
right,
without ruining things or, like, for instance, the wells, like, I mean, that would be a huge concern.
right.
You
Yep,
have a whole entire neighborhood now that potentially horse manure could be leaking into. Type of conversation that is for you guys to figure out, but that is a concern. Like, can they utilize their property differently?
if you have an artesian well, you don't have to worry about it getting in there. Your septic system is 100 feet from your well. Your neighbor's further away than that, so they're not going to disturb your well. So that's one thing you don't have to worry about.
horse manure, unless it's put into a swamp, it's not going to be running all over the place because it's pretty dry
What
in
if it's
nature.
dripping into wetlands?
Excuse me?
Dripping into wetlands.
Then that's a
Dripping into it.
conservation.
Paddocks abut wetlands. Their horses, the fences are along the wetlands.
And the grade goes down to the wetland.
Grade goes down towards wetlands.
So
another book.
that,
So they
that,
have a wetland and
Yep.
then the wells.
so that wouldn't necessarily be covered under any kind of animal regulation. That's covered under conservation already.
And the wetlands is not where you're getting your water from. Your water is from down in the granite, so far down, it's not ever going to get.
Not going to seep that far.
You have to get through bedrock in order to put your well in, so.
Right.
'cause you don't want surface water for a well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address the,
Yes, Ms. Vice
thank
Chair.
you. In the section of the draft about manure and waste management, there is a section on runoff prevention that says measures must be taken to prevent nutrient runoff into storm drains, wells, or water bodies in accordance with the Town of Douglas Wetlands Protection Regulations, which I believe is what you're talking about. That regulation was put in place by the Conservation Commission, and also the Massachusetts Regulation 310 CMR. There's a mass reg about runoff. So if they're in violation, then you would follow the process of filing a complaint
with the Conservation Committee.
Is
Yeah.
that-
If you
Who
felt
we
that had runoff going into the wetlands, absolutely.
yeah, because that regulation's
You
already
could
in
do
place.
that with the community development.
Thank you.
And I do like your suggestion of the setback. That was something that I had put in, a question of manure must be positioned away from what distance from wetlands, but also, from the nearest dwelling or from the property line. We talked about that at the last meeting, and Buzz said that he spreads his manure across his fields, which may go up to the property line. I don't think you have neighbors there on that side, but, that's something we could definitely consider, because, I absolutely see your point and hear the issue there, that it is something that folks should keep in mind. You don't want to put your manure pile right near your neighbor's house. Like, we could say, how many feet would be comfortable from the lot line? Like, how many would you suggest? Like, I have no idea, like, how far the smell carries,
I mean, I guess it all depends on how hot the wind's blowing that day.
Right,
But
right.
I've been over the neighbors, and they've had the
Jesse
same
first, and I go
problem.
back there.
What's that? I'm sorry?
Multiple houses have had the same problem.
Right.
It's just
Yeah, I
odor
see what
carries.
you're- I see what you're
And,
saying.
Cow is a little stronger than horse,
Right.
In my opinion, you get pigs.
Horse
It's a lot
Right.
stronger,
Right?
So that's, I guess that's something for future topic, is
Right.
the amount of distance.
It could be a question of,
And it's way worse on a hot summer day.
right?
That's
'cause
right.
No matter what,
Yeah.
it's way worse on a hot summer day.
We do have a suggestion about, that's up to the town about, it was a group suggestion or someone suggested and everyone was like, oh yeah, about a place to bring your manure in town. Could the town provide that? Could they provide
Yeah, I mean,
composting
that
resources?
kinda seems a little unreasonable to make someone start trucking it.
Right, right,
I know of larger horse farms that have it removed.
right, right. And that's in here too. I had a question of, I forgot to address this, or removal at
Jesse,
which,
further than you.
which interval, like regular intervals, how to define that?
Yeah.
What would be a regular
Just
interval?
something to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, appreciate it.
Jesse?
I was, Jesse from U Street, I was just going to clarify if you define these zones or if this applies, like the regular farm applies to 5 acres plus and everything else, or some considerations, I believe in the zoning laws, you even mentioned the primary purpose of the residential zones, even in RAs or RCs, the primary purpose of the property is for residential purposes, with secondary being the businesses or opportunities, in this case a farm, would be a secondary purpose of the property. So that might be slightly different than the true agricultural zones, where the primary purpose of the land is agricultural, but happens to be housed for the people that work the farm, but the primary purpose of the majority of that land is for agricultural purposes. So that kind of, if you define those zones or the things on which regulations or which type of thing applies, I think that would cover it as well. As long as you clearly define that, unlike the faction one, which just said it agricultural and left it vague.
So-
You define it clearly, which zones or whatever else that takes care of it, I think that will add that clarity to help. And it would give the farmers the right to do their job, and you can't, other than once they move in after the fact, right next to other houses, it would be very beneficial to have that for those farmers.
Okay, so I'm going to address what he says, because since I've been playing on zoning for the last 12 or whatever years, what you had just described is the primary use of the lot. Okay, the primary use is historically residential. All these other things are accessory uses, and accessory uses are allowed. So you're not going to be able to split up the zone like that and say whether it's residential or agricultural, because it's allowed in that area. And they're done like that for a reason. So you have RC zoning that you can have a commercial business there. Right? But you can't have it in agricultural. If you're in RA zone, you can't have a business where customers are coming to your house. It's spelled right out. But you can find a conflicting thing in the zoning book that says if you have 2 acres or more, you can have a business. So
If you're a commercial farmer, you're not a business? Right?
Right.
Like Douglas Orchards, commercial farm. That's a business. So how does that fit?
I have no idea.
Nobody's complaining.
Good answer.
Good point.
That was pre-me.
I'm in the same boat, I'm a commercial
I
farm.
didn't forget the order.
I'm a commercial farm, but, I don't have a store or anything,
Yeah.
but, so.
Well, you don't have customers coming to your house, so, yeah.
Sometimes for hay, but that's
what
about it.
the difference is, so. And you're an RCE anyways.
Right.
Yeah. Good argument. I know what your zone is.
Autumn, I live on Hemlock Street, so this is kind of based on the density thing.
Yep.
And why I think it's a little bit silly, I live on 46 acres, and my neighbor who has roosters, I don't care, it doesn't bother me, I love the sound of them. They're like 500 feet away. Through trees, can't even see their house, but I can still hear the roosters, so I don't think the density thing matters. Is the 20 acres, even if you have 20 acres, that's the low zone, the low density. So I don't think the density is going to play a fact, whether there's going to be complaints on noise, smell, any of it. So that's why the density, I just feel like is not going to work out in the way that we want it to, no matter what, however we play it. I don't think it's going to work.
So the density is the first piece. If you don't start with that, you can't address anything else, right? So if you have, let's talk about smell and manure, right? So if you identified the density as being an issue, what could be allowed? So if you're on a quarter acre lot, and it's a dense area and you can't have your horses there, right? You're not going to have a manure problem, are you? Right? So it's just not going to come up, right? If, as we talked about it at the very beginning, when I brought in that unit thing and sent everybody in circles with it, on the first section, you could have 6 units, and it was a duck, a chicken, or a rabbit, right? And that's, the purpose of that was to try to identify what's reasonable to have in that small area. Right? And if you have those animals, you're not going to have some of these other things that are coming into play. So when you have the density portion, we start down that path. Then you also, what comes into it is, I have 5.5 acres, my land's 315 feet wide, but she happens to build her house 25 feet off the property line, and then she complained about my horse one day, so I decided I was going to put my manure pile over there, which is probably what he's dealing with on this side. If there's something in there that addresses and says I can't reasonably put that there, then I can't antagonize her. So
That's already in play.
where is it?
Isn't there already a manure? Yeah, it's the state.
Then nobody's using it. So this is all part of the process, right? So if it's already in place, we're making references to different state things. When it gets to the next level, right, the Board of Health should be looking at that and saying, all right, we already have that in place, and we're going to adopt that regulation as part of ours, right? If that's an easy path for them, I would think that they would do that.
And so now we're bringing on how many animals we want on a property, right? So if, say somebody does want to have a horse, but they get 3 horses, I feel like that's on MSPCA. I don't feel like that should be the town to be like, no, you're not allowed to have that.
Why is it on the MSPCA? If you have 3 horses.
And they're not properly cared for? Because
You didn't add that element.
that's the difference.
You didn't add that. You're adding it as you go along, right? So you just said, wait a minute, let's back up. You said you can have 1 horse, but you decide you want 3 horses. It's not Douglas's problem or business. That's the MSPCA, right? Then when I asked you about it, you said, well, if they're abusing the horses, you didn't say that. You said, so if the situation, regulation, whatever this thing wants to call, and I'm kind of jumping around because it's like every word I say, it's the wrong word. So whatever this thing is that we're trying to create, right, says that you can have 1 horse and you decide to have 3 horses and you have no issues because you're maintaining them properly and good management, barn management or whatever, right? Or farm management, however we want to do it, everything's good.
Right.
Right? But if you're trying to antagonize Sam because he played his music too loud or he was on his dirt bike at 10 o'clock at night, so you decide to aggravate him. Now, the town came down and said, Autumn, you can only have one horse, you get 3 of them, right? So your antagonistic approach to him backfired on you, right? So it gives something that you can identify. Right now, if somebody comes down, okay, so she's got 3 horses, what do you do with it? Everybody shrugs their shoulders and walks away. And it gets very frustrating for property owners and people that are complaining or affected by the animals, but the animal owners are also in limbo on this, right? So it's not fair to either party, right? This is all we're trying to accomplish and get to, so I don't know, we keep saying the same things, but I think we're gonna get there at some point. If you don't have anything else, I'm gonna go over to this.
Ally, I'm on U Street.
Yeah.
So I have 2 things. I wanted to go back to the coop. So there are actually, and I didn't even know this, but I recently had some landscapers out at my place of employment to get quotes, and one of them, which is just over the line in Connecticut, he actually will go to your home and pick up your manure, and he does a composting process to said manure, and then he uses that in his landscaping business for garden beds and things like that. So there are definitely options for people like your neighbor to have their poop removed appropriately, and they pick it up for free. So there are definitely options for that. That was the one thing that was a side note I just wanted to say.
Right.
But my concern also is this whole low density, high density. I have 11 acres and I probably have like 20 something abutters. So you would probably consider me low density because I have all of these abutters. So with that, my next question is, when you tell me I can't have so many animals on my 11 acres because I have a low density property, where are my animals going? I'm just curious, like what I'm supposed to do with my...
So I think you might be looking at it different than what I had explained, right?
The
So
opposite.
low density means you're not affecting anybody. There's nobody near you that is affected. High density would be clustered houses, right? And they're 50 feet apart. I'm going to just use fictitious numbers. They're 50 feet apart, right? So that's high density. But if I'm thinking about my neighbors, the neighbor to the right, he's probably 350 feet away. The one to my left, the left of me is probably 75 feet to my property line. He's probably about 175 to 200 feet away from me, right? I don't consider that high density. I think that low density, right? But if I was to go down Mechanic Street and take a right after I go over the bridge behind Jackman's and all those houses on the left, they're pretty close together, right? That I would consider high density, right? It's just the concentration of the homes.
Is there a thought to maybe for those who might lose their pets, is there a thought on partnering with the MSPCA or someone? I mean, I know the whole point of this is to, keep everybody keeping their pets, but as this continues with sort of this units and acreage, my concern is that people are going to have to make some hard choices, and has the town thought about working with anybody on that? Because there are going to be people who aren't going to be able to keep their animals if we nitpick it to this micromanaging thing that it kind of keeps going to.
Yep. So as I stated at the beginning, my personal goal, and I don't think anybody here on sitting at this table has any thoughts of anybody getting rid of animals, right? Is try to figure out how we can actually keep our animals and have a way to address some of the concerns that are coming in. Doing nothing isn't the answer, so we got to figure out what I see your Autumn. I mean Dallas. I'll get you in a minute. Doing nothing isn't the answer. we have to come up with something, and I don't know what the answer is. And we're struggling through this and trying to come up with it.
May I speak to her point? Because we did put in the draft some safeguards for that. There's grandfathering, which outlines keeping the animals that you have for the natural life of those animals, and also an application for a special permit or variance, so you can apply to the town if you want to have animals in excess of the recommended units. So there are a couple of safeguards designed to be sort of like checks and balances where, as long as you're not mistreating your animals, in which case, there would be complaints, concerns, you can apply for either a permit or the grandfathering would protect, because, God knows, I don't want to say, you can only have 10 units. I'm sorry, you got to get rid of 3 of your goats. I don't want to say that to anybody. That would break my heart.
Right, I mean, and it just, that's my concern is, maybe not myself, but others are gonna, really have to struggle with that. And personally, I would just sell my house and move because I would
Right.
my animals, but that's not everyone can afford to do that, so.
The units came up because how do you figure this out, right? So I struggle going through this. First, I'm looking at animal regulations. I kept coming up with dog bites, right? I'm like, all right, so it's gonna be something. So I finally stumbled on the farm animals, and that's what started this thing. And I tripped across that survey that was done in Canada. And it's like, well, maybe this makes sense. To bring, just for a starting point. All this stuff is just starting points. We're trying to get through it so we can get down there and get back to some of the questions that we have in here that have to be identified, whether or not about density or something. I think that's something that we really need to consider, because how do you identify anything without considering density? Dallas?
So,
That's Dallas on U Street.
there's a lot that's been said the last couple of months with this. There's a lot of moving parts, but it really is going to boil down to the enforcement of anything that is decided here, the Board of Health, the Selectmen, whatever way it goes. The animal inspector wants to leave. We're going to have a new animal inspector. So let's say new animal inspector comes in, he doesn't know the properties, he doesn't know the people. He goes out to some place that's getting complaints, and he says nothing's wrong, but there are still complaints. And that's going to happen no matter what. I go to farms all the time helping people who have either an actual complaint, something that we do address and try to fix, or just because person next to me doesn't like animals. So what's going to happen there? How is that going to be taken care of? Because if the professional is saying there's nothing wrong, then there's nothing wrong. But are they going to keep coming out over and over again? That's wasting town resources a lot. What steps are in this draft to protect the people in those situations? Because that often is more likely than a real issue occurring.
They're not yet.
So this was actually discussed last week in meeting and the meeting before, that if, how was the animal inspector tonight? Comes over to my house because Jessica is complaining about my animals, but he has something that he can actually look at. All right, Mike, you can have 3 horses, and all right, it looks like you're taking care of them. They got clean water. They look healthy. Your paddocks aren't a mud hole, and all these other things that he would look at as I would assume, as an animal inspector, that's what they would look at, right? But she's not satisfied with that, so she keeps putting in a complaint, right? After he documents it a couple times, now you have a document, I have a document, not you. I have a document that I can turn around, go down to Uxbridge, and file a complaint against her, a civil complaint, and that's how it becomes civil at some point, right? And if you're not doing anything wrong, you do have protection, right? But there has to be something, you can't go down and evaluate whether it's a valid complaint or not if you don't have nothing for a basis.
No, and I understand that part. I'm just speaking specifically, let's pretend like it gets passed, everything's good, and then the complaint does happen. I would highly suggest putting something in the draft about after 2 complaints or 3 complaints where there is no actual problem and it's just a neighbor or however many, like, that needs to be in there as well as a.
Yeah, but you don't understand. So the government, the town government, if they receive a complaint, they have to act on the complaint. They can't just ignore it and say, Mike's, Jessica's nuts. She just complained about Mike because she don't like him. They can't do that. They still have to come down each time there's a complaint and look at it, right? But at some point, you get tired of it, or I get tired of it, right? And that's my avenue, is I can turn around and say, I got to document it. They've been down here 6 times. There's nothing going on. She's just harassing me. And I think there is a recourse on a civil level on that. So there's no way of getting around people complaining. People will just complain, watch the news every day, right? It's just nonsense, right? It's what the world's made up of. But there has to be some sort of guideline for the, think of yourself as an animal inspector, right? And no, but think of yourself realistically, if you can separate yourself from situations and just look at it and say, all right, you get a complaint, you come down to my house and you look at it, what do you make your judgment on? All right, it's got water. Okay, does he have too many? I don't know. We don't have no regulation on that. Can he have those? I don't know. We don't have no regulation on it. That's the problem, right? So you couldn't do your job because you would have nothing to go by. It's like a cop pulling you over if there's no law. It's like, I know you did something wrong, I just don't know what it was, right? It just, you have to have something in order to get through this.
To speak to Dallas's question, there is a section, it's pretty much a whole page on complaints, hearings, concerns, and fines, and how they're to be handled by the animal inspector. They shall investigate it. Of course, if it's a concern of animal abuse or inhumane treatment, I added the number for the MSPCA that they should be contacted immediately, so to go to them first. There is a section that outlines if no violation is found. It does mention repeated complaints. I think last time we had talked about escalating, it would go to the Board of Health first. They would notify the complainant of the findings. The Board of Health may choose to call a hearing to try to resolve the issue. That's up to them if they want to do that or not. Or, I forgot to add from last time, and I just wrote a note, I could add, or it may be escalated to a civil lawsuit. We could include that. And then there's a section on if the violation is found, which we amended since last time to begin with a verbal conversation, then issue a written warning for a second offense, escalate to a public hearing, and then fines. So there's a process that's outlined for both scenarios of either no violation or violation. So it is in there.
This section is put in here assuming that the rest of this would be attached to it.
Sure.
Okay, no, it just needs to be said, because it's not, you can't handle a complaint if you don't have any guidelines.
Right.
So I'm going to keep going back to that just to make sure that it's not as simple as just saying, they have a path to go. They still need something to make their judgment on. Anybody else have anything in the audience? Yes.
Randy Smith, Manchog Street.
Yep.
So, I don't know if I'm able to ask, but is this just about like farm animals, like horses, cows and stuff, or is it like household pets as well?
Not household pets.
Okay,
No,
I want to ask a question, that's fine.
No, so in town, we have a lot of hobby farms, right?
Yep.
I consider mine the hobby farm. We got 3 horses, that my wife likes horses, so she has 3 horses, right? Jessica has chickens, that's a hobby farm, right? And he has cows and horses, he got stuck with both. Everybody has some sort of little hobby farm, right? It really exploded when the egg prices went up crazy, so everybody got chickens, and then they realized how much work it was, so we'll see how long they keep their chickens. But this is just to try to come up with a way to address complaints, I guess. Complaints, concerns, or whatever that comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Anybody else have anything at the, yep,
I've read the animal inspector duties
Yep.
requirements, and,
I haven't shut up long enough to read it.
yeah, but when you all do, this just addresses contagious diseases, and if an animal has rabies, so I don't think this would be the person to go out and determine fencing setbacks or violations of any of what we want to, this nitpicky stuff we want to put in here,
Well,
unless we increase his duties.
yeah, so fences, that's a real easy one, right? So the state building code says that any fence under 7 feet tall does not need a permit. You can put it right on your property line, and you have that right to do it. And
I didn't mean fence, I meant
Oh, no, yeah.
manure, a
Right,
setback
right.
like
Yep.
that. People complain, and he doesn't, he can't address that in here,
right, and you know why?
because that's not his job description.
No, because there's nothing that he has to attach it to, right? So it's never been, I'll get the, it's never been defined. So they couldn't put it as, you couldn't put it in a job description if it wasn't there.
Well, that's what I'm saying, as we go
It'll be a-
on,
there'll
we
be a-
have to increase his duties.
No, we don't have to. The Board of Health will adjust
Well, we
his
have
job
to
description.
Let
Right.
them know when we hand in whatever we're going to hand in,
Yep,
that
Yep.
he will be affected.
we can make a recommendation that they
Yeah.
amend his job description as needed.
Autumn Lombardi, Hemlock Street, just to go off of your thing on like quarantining and stuff like that, and like spreadable diseases, that's all the state met. So that should have nothing to do with any of us, Board of Health,
That's,
anything like that.
our animal inspector would report that.
Yes.
Yeah, to
that-
the state.
yes.
And the state that would give them the guidelines.
And that's all
on
his
of that.
duties are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I said at the beginning, the selectmen have it on their agenda to discuss this on Tuesday night, so if anybody has any interest to be a part of that discussion, you may want to show up. That's at 7 PM.
What part of this are they discussing, the whole thing, or just whether it's a bylaw or a regulation?
So it's going to be number 9 on the agenda, so I would guess it's somewhere around 8 o'clock that'll happen.
But you never know, they might bump it up.
You never know, absolutely. So what it says on the agenda is animal regulation discussion. And all it is a discussion, so there's no action being taken. It doesn't say possible votes after it. And I'm sure it's a discussion because I brought it up. Right? So. Just looking to see if there's any attachment that it got sent to me today, the agenda, see if there's any attachment to this. I don't see anything. So, we're gonna have a discussion on it, whatever that entails. I don't know, they didn't share that part of it with me. I'm sure I'll know about it on Tuesday. Difficult process for everybody, but it's something that I think we need to go through. So, when do we want to meet again?
Could we do the 26th, 2 weeks from tonight?
weeks from tonight, how's that work for everybody?
I'm wide open.
Huh? You're wide open, yeah?
Yeah.
Weather permitting.
Sounds good.
All right, 26 to 7 PM.
Looks like this room's wide open.
What do we think about drafting in an alternate based more on the,
So what I'm going to do myself, and I was going to bring that up, is, and if anybody else wants to do the same, and they're free to do that, I'm going to create my own thoughts in a draft and share that with everybody. And if anybody else wants to do it, bring it. And we'll look at them and see if, not necessarily like one over the other, but maybe incorporate different things from all of them into one. We did a pretty good job of narrowing it down. We don't have much on the sections that we have to dissect too bad.
I think it's pretty good, except for the density. You should be able to have the animals you want, as long as you take care of them.
Yeah.
But when it does affect your neighbor, that's when it becomes a problem.
Right, so
Whether the neighbor's
So
just
how do
miserable
you
or not.
identify when it affects your neighbor? That's the problem that we're
That's the
facing.
problem we're
right? So we keep going, I keep going back to it, right? And not to torture anybody, but
yeah. My suggestion, if
I don't have a
anything,
definition, I can't identify.
if anything, it's setbacks, because like that gentleman was saying, he's in a low-density area, and he's still having a problem. So even if it's low density, that does not prevent your neighbor from putting their manure pile right on your lot line. So I think, if anything, setbacks, because that, again, will take care of itself. If you say your manure pile must be 100 feet from the lot line or 100 feet from the nearest dwelling, that automatically takes that right out of the small lots, because they won't be able to, they don't have the frontage to position it 100 feet away. So that would automatically take care of itself.
That would eliminate a lot of people being able to have animals in that case.
Absolutely. My
It might,
frontage
right?
is
So-
115 feet.
Right. And then how do you come up with that number? Like I said, how many feet from, would you suggest?
So I
'Cause the
load my
wind-
spreader up and do my fields that are on the lot line.
Right.
What am I
right.
doing?
Exactly,
Am I legal to do that or not? I
Right.
spread manure on fields forever,
right.
but now it's right against somebody's house. So
And what's that 100 feet gonna do? It's
Just the
still
middle of
gonna
the field?
smell just as bad.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
I know. It's a
No matter
tricky,
if it's 100 feet
Yep.
it's a
or
tricky thing, because
6
it's,
inches.
Yeah, so we're talking about a few different things.
Yeah.
So let's be realistic about it. You're talking about stockpiling of manure, okay?
Unless somebody
not-
composts, then there's no smell.
Yes, there is. I compost mine for probably
But you have
a year.
shavings and everything and with it,
Everything
or
goes
is
in
it
it.
just a big pile of,
The horse manure, the cow, the pig, it
Yeah.
all goes in the same pile, gets stirred up, extra hay, whatever. And then when it's all composted, it gets moved.
but the smell,
The
you know?
smell is there when it's hot, no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
When it's hot out, you're not going to stop that smell. And the hotter and more humidity, the further it spreads. There's no way out of that.
Whether you have one animal or.
It doesn't matter how many animals it's just the quantity of smell. If you have more, of course, it smells a lot worse.
Get used to it
But
over time.
when it's cold out, I don't smell my pig at all. First warm day, I can smell him. And there's no, I mean, you can't help it. It's just the way it
Right.
is.
Animals
But if you
stink, they smell.
if you overdo it, of course, you're overdoing it. You should know when you're overdoing it. If you can't walk into your own house and without gagging, then you overdid it. It's that simple.
I think too, you got to think about people that move into residential areas that don't want animals.
Right. And they're paying
So if
a
you
lot
got,
of money
you know,
for
like
their
the guy
house.
with all the houses, and the guy comes in the farm behind him, well, people buy in those areas because they don't want to have those nuisances. So that's a consideration, you know, we're all animal people, but you got to consider the,
Right.
like my mother's not an animal
Right.
person. So you got to remember those people too have
Right.
a say in what's going on.
It's such a
because-
tricky thing, so how do you
Right.
keep everyone happy? You
Right.
know, I do feel for him,
Right.
You know, my mom lives
But
in
that-
Woodstock, Connecticut. I drive by
That's
a
where
cow farm on the way to her house.
get a
and
residential
woo!
district,
Don't
like
keep
you're
your
saying,
windows
it's a
down.
density thing. It's like, you're close, then it's a no.
There's just some lots in town that's going to be unrealistic to
Right,
have
right.
large animals on it, is what it comes down to.
Or could be small.
Regardless of what they did in the 17 and 1800s.
Right.
And
That's right.
now, it could be different. But anyways, I think I agree with how we're making progress. And
We have a lot of properties that are designed for farming 100 years ago in Douglas. So it's tough to do them.
Right.
A lot of the hayfields to keep up, you don't even know where they are. They're off in the woods. And there's new houses all along all the roads. The hayfields are still back in there. And you go by my house, you don't know I have animals.
Right.
You wouldn't know how many animals I have. My barn's way down in the back. It's probably
I do
300
once in
feet
a
from
while.
my house.
It's only when they get out.
Only when they get out, they come to your house. But they get out, tree falls on the fence, they find it first,
Yeah.
not you. So, it's the only time. And the police have a direct line to my house. Anybody spots them, they call me up, I go get them. Middle of the
They don't
winter,
even ask who owns the black and white cows.
nope. But I only got one black and white one, now they're gonna be confused.
Anyways, all right, so next meeting will be June 26th at 7 PM.
That's in 2
Again,
weeks.
look through the draft that was provided. Take another look at the Freetown animal regulation that Linda brought in. If you don't have a copy of it or can't find it, like I probably won't.
I have extras. You didn't get a copy, did you?
We can pass that to Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And look at this document that we're creating and see if there's anything on there that you want changed or reworded or eliminated or added to. Just do it so we can try to get through it. Again, we're all here for the same purpose, so anybody's suggestion isn't a bad suggestion, it's just a suggestion, so. If nobody has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
What time is it up there?
Almost 9.
8:47.
Yeah.
So moved?
Yep.
She
Second.
made me word her whole motion.
Huh?
You made me word her whole motion. So, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I like
Thanks, everybody, for coming out.